to try and bring housing to, or bring inventory level up in housing. I guess that's probably the easiest way to say it. And now, how this is going to take place is beyond me, because when I think about how it is that there's going to be an increase in housing activity, as far as the creation of housing, I think about where lumber supply and inventory is landing. Now, this is something we have talked about here just recently, and there has been a dramatic depletion inside of the inventory level when it comes to lumber. So I just kind of step back a little bit and I think about, okay, what happens if there is government action that starts to go into creation of homes, creation of dwellings to live at, and the lumber demand starts to increase? What ends up happening when you have a lot of government spending that takes place within a particular industry, when you don't really have good oversight of government anyway? Like, most of the time when you have government action taking place, they're usually doing the stupidest things, right? Because government never does anything right. So now here you have government all of a sudden stepping up and taking action to try and bring more inventory of homes, dwellings, places to live. And that increase in production of places to live is going to increase the demand for lumber. Now, when I step back and I look at the lumber industry and I think about how depleted the inventory levels are, how much mill curtailment and permanent shutdowns have taken place, and how much activity can take place within the lumber industry, considering that there is a bottleneck that takes place within that industry itself, as you can only produce so much lumber at such a capacity. There's things called kiln dried lumber that takes a room, a facility that you put the lumber into. It takes a certain amount of time to dry that lumber, and you cannot speed up the process. And unless you build more kilns, you can only produce so much at such a speed. And if the demand is somewhat unlimited, considering that it's government spending taking place, you know, during a supply-demand imbalance, you're going to find the prices moving. And now when I think about this process, when I think about how this would go down, here you got right now set up in that actual, reality, the fact that lumber can only be produced at such a speed and it's getting depleted, right? Like more mill curtailments, more mill shutdowns, promising of more future shutdowns taking place. Every day that this happens, that there is going to be less ability to produce. Right? This is happening not only here in the United States, but in Canada as well. Big time in Canada and British Columbia. So now here you have two candidates who are talking about how it is that they are going to bring housing to the people, one way or the other. Now, however they promise it, it doesn't really matter how it comes here, right? I mean, you can take, this one's promising to do it this way and this one's promising to do it that way, whatever, doesn't matter, right? What does matter is that the action of actually trying to build a home is going to increase the demand for lumber. Regardless of how it happens, that's what will end up taking place. And if you have a limited supply of lumber and you have a depleted amount of resources that can produce the lumber itself, then you're going to find the unlimited demand coming from government going to a limited supply is going to have prices going through the roof. If prices end up moving up dramatically within the lumber industry, then the new construction of a new home cannot possibly become cheaper. You see, if lumber prices are moving up, and that is a huge part of the increase in the cost of homes, then you know that the price of homes are probably not going to come down. They're only going to move up due to the government action that has taken place to try and bring more homes to the people. It's actually going to cause it's going to cause the reverse to take place, where homes prices end up moving up, making it even more difficult for people to get into a house. All right. 83 people watching. What kind of questions or comments do we have so far? Let's go up here to the very beginning. We got hello everyone coming from Treston. All right. Tom says good morning. Stephen says greetings. Sean says good day, good sir. Freedom. What does that say? Freedom to off the grid. Sup, brah? All right. Sunrise Tactical Gear. I like the name. Happy Sunday, everyone. See the Mark. Good morning, y'all. Johnny Midas. Morning, Simon. All-nighter. Good morning, everyone. If you had to build an underground house, bro, bunker, for some reason, how would you do it as building material expert? I would probably, okay, so if I was to do something that was underground, depending on where you live, like if you're dealing with some place that is going to be like chances of flooding and stuff, you might want to reconsider how it is that you're going to get this thing built. But if you're in an area that has good drainage and all that, and you figured that part out, I think probably underground bunker built out of something like insulated concrete forms, I think it would be like a great way to go about it. That's me personally. I don't know. There's other people who probably come up with some other ideas, but I think that would make for good walls, even if you were to bury it. And then as far as a roof goes, I would make it really inconspicuous kind of thought, like maybe bring it all the way down to having like maybe a container sitting on top of the entrance to get into it, so that you actually had to go into what looked like a storage unit to get into what is the actual bunker, which would be below it, and that nobody knew was there. That just looks like a container sitting out there on the ground, but yet there's a dwelling underneath it. I'd probably do something like that. All right, cruising down. We are overstocked with homes in Denver surrounding. No one is buying. Yeah. Lumber prices. See, here's the thing though. If you go in, I understand like nobody is buying comparatively to what had happened during like the last few years. But when you think about it on a scale of like how the housing market used to operate and what would typically take place when you had elevated interest rates or more of an elevated interest rate environment when it comes to housing, it is very apparent that there is more of a buying opportunity to then not have to like it gives the buyers an opportunity to actually price around and look for a home. They don't have to act quickly. They don't have to have offer pricing that's far overreaching. This is like typical of what a housing market would be. Now, what I'm looking at right now is two different things that are happening, right? You have the existing housing market, and then you got the new housing market. And new housing market seems to be operating differently. The people who are building those new homes are offering incentives that is different than what the existing housing market can offer. It's like a split in how these two are operating. And new home sales, like the new constructed home sales, are more abundant within the real estate market than the existing home sales. And I would imagine it's due to a lot of the incentives that are being offered. And now on top of that, when you think about how many cash buyers are going into this new constructed sale, now whether or not it's institutional buyers or whatever, okay, that it very well could be. It doesn't matter. It's still cash buyers going into it. They do not care what the interest rates are. So now it seems like the new housing, the new construction market is taking on a different scenario than the existing housing market is. And I think that that's something that we should keep an eye on, because I believe that it is two different markets. So when we're speaking about like what's going on with the new construction market or what's going on with real estate, a lot of people are focused in on the existing part, saying, hey, look at all these homes that are for sale that are just sitting there. And I'm like, well, that's almost like a different market now, you know? And I mean, it's not. I mean, it's all homes, it's all real estate, but it's like you can kind of see two different things happening here when you have more cash buyers buying in, and new home sales are more prevalent than existing home sales within the real estate market. And there's a lot of reasonings for that. Again, that the existing home sales just don't have access to, or are not necessarily having that same accessibility, especially when it comes to like the incentives coming from the builders. Uh, home prices are dropping in this area. Okay. And then again, we also have to think about this. When you say home prices are dropping, the price on my home has dropped dramatically from what it had peaked out at during when it was running up like crazy. I mean, it did some ridiculous high increases. I mean, it was going up so fast. It was like, I mean, the equity was like the estimated value would go up like more than I could earn in a month, right? I mean, it was just like crazy. It was so unreasonable. So when I saw a dramatic amount come out of the estimated value of the home, it didn't surprise me. Like it was a super amount. I don't know, $80,000 or something. It was just like the Zillow estimate thing was just going nuts. It wasn't real anymore. So since then, it has come down dramatically. And after that dramatic drop, it has come down quite a bit. Like, even another, I think probably $20,000 have come off of it since then. So you're talking almost like $100,000 difference that has happened. Maybe not quite that much, maybe a little less than that. The $100,000 difference from what this thing was Zillow estimating at, which I knew was ridiculous to begin with, to what it's at now, and even since then has dropped a little bit. It's still dramatically higher than what I had paid for it. Like, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000 higher than what I had paid for it. And considering how much I had to put down on it, I am so far from being underwater. It's just like the house prices may come down. They may even have more room to come down, but it's not like a destitution type of thing that's happening. It's offering up less of a profit for to get the sale done. And this is really what I think a lot of people are seeing or experiencing when they see house prices coming down, is that they're looking at house prices coming down from their all-time highs or recent highs that are really unrealistic highs to begin with, and they're coming down to now not even normal, right? They're still high. Like, they need to come down dramatically more in order for it to become accessible to the average person out there and their income. Their income just simply can't make it with these interest rates. So interest rates need to come down or the price of the homes comes down. But what we find is that existing home sales are very difficult to find moving in the market, but new home sales, that's happening. Right? Though that market happens. Oh, China is in a crash as we speak, in my opinion. Yeah, no, it's not just your opinion. I believe it. Like, you'd see, like, a deflationary economy that is happening is very, very difficult to operate in. Most people who are producers and savers, right, who have saved up and then are experiencing a deflationary economy, if you are knowing what you are doing at that time and you have saved up and you are ready for it, you know that production is going to fall and you can work your way through it. Most people are not going to experience something like that. Right? Because if you are a saver, then you're going to be able to take advantage of the low prices. Right? If you are the type of person who has reached out on debt, right? You need a certain income to bring in order to cover your debts, and you start moving into a deflationary scenario, and you are not a saver, then what you are going to end up experiencing is a very difficult time operating in a way that you can continue to maintain your debts. And if you can't maintain your debts, you're going to start going into default. And if you're going into default, somebody's not getting paid. And if they don't get paid, they're going to go into default. And so goes the problem of a deflationary economy. And this is what China is essentially experiencing right now. Those who are sitting in the saving position, hey, they're awesome. They're buying up the cheaper things, the cheaper assets, so long as they can. But everybody else who has pushed themselves out on debt, who are living paycheck to paycheck, those type of people, those ones are, if they can even find the work, essentially during a deflationary aspect, it becomes almost impossible for them to operate in. And this is what China is facing right now. The United States is facing quite the opposite. Right? We seem to have a an inflationary economy that is growing. How do they put this? I wish I could just say it just as cleanly as they do. Operating at its potential alongside low inflation with stable prices and full employment. Like, this is what the Federal Reserve is attempting to shoot for, right? I was talking with somebody in a Zoom meeting earlier. That's like their Goldilocks moment that they're going for. But again, like, I think about what it is that's going to take place going into the future. If it's set up this way, think about how this is set up. This is almost like how far are we into this? 15 minutes into it. Okay, if you lasted this long, think about this conspiracy theory. Okay, think about this conspiracy theory right now. That if you know, like, if I can say, hey, there's a depleted lumber inventory right now. And if you throw a bunch of government money at that, you are going to find the price of that skyrocketing, and the people who produce it are probably going to end up making a lot of money off of it. So if you were like in the position right now where you could throw a whole ton of money at a particular commodity that is going to force those companies into a profitable situation, considering that it's going to be government money, unlimited amounts of it essentially going into a very limited amount of commodity that can only be produced at a certain speed, right? I mean, this is like almost like being perfectly set up. And I'm not trying to say, hey, you should go out and invest in a particular way. That's up to you. I'm not an investor. I'm not somebody who's giving financial advice. I'm just saying this is what I see going on right now. So if you were thinking like any kind of conspiracy theory out there, and these people are getting together to essentially, make something go down that then forces taxpayer money into a particular person's pocket, think about how this is going, right? I mean, it was just like, oh, there's a limited amount of houses. Oh, you poor people, you need houses. We're going to build you houses. One way or the other, we're going to get houses built. No matter how we get these houses built, it's going to force money into lumber. Guess what? Limited amount of lumber. Huh. Well, if we all know that this is going to happen and we all have the ability to buy into a particular company or so, a group of particular companies who are going to benefit very, intensely off of this particular move, right? Can you see it being set up now? Like, I don't know. I mean, to me, like, this isn't necessarily something that is a conspiracy. This is just happening, right? I mean, I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's like the government has all got together and all these people are like, hey, man, let's figure out a way that we can screw around with the real estate market, deplete the amount of new construction that is happening out there so that the lumber demand would fall. And then that way, all these mills would go into depletion and curtailments and permanent shutdowns, depleting the entire inventory level so that then at one point we can take a bunch of taxpayer money so that we could throw it at the housing market that would then increase the demand of lumber that would then force the lumber prices to go through the roof, considering that there would be a limited amount of production that could ever possibly take place. Maybe that's the way it's going down, right? I mean, I don't know, but right, is it something like that? um, is that why they're building houses out of cardboard? All right, Brody says, hit the like on the stream, please, everybody, because that will make YouTube share it more widely so we get more interesting questions in here. Thank you, Brody. I appreciate you, man. All right. Why is it obvious we are in a bubble? So which companies should be considered? I'm going to leave it up to you. Right? I'm going to leave it up to you to do your own research on this. This isn't that hard, okay? Because there's a lot of different ways that you can go and do your own research in order to find out which companies it is that you need to invest in. I am not somebody who's going to give you that sort of advice. I don't want to, right? It doesn't take that much for you to go and do it yourself. Now, there is ways of finding home builders and suppliers ETFs that are out there that are leveraged. Be very careful with some of those ETFs. They can be very volatile in the position that you take with them. There are a lot of people out there who are builders or are lumber mill suppliers, right? That's the industry that they're in. There's a lot of them. All you have to do is just Google their, whatever, major lumber mill stocks or something like that. Just, you can do it super simple, and I'm sure you can find a list of them. Go and do your research on those things. Now, with that being said, again, I'm just telling you about what it is that I am seeing, what it is that I'm seeing being set up. I was able to call out the lumber industry back in 2019 going into 2020 when the prices were skyrocketing, and I was able to call out their peak and say that they were actually going to go back to their normal prices. This is where we're at. Now, I know the situation that we're in right now is not something that is going to be very obvious to people. There's not a lot of articles. I found one coming out of the National Home Builders Association. I left a link for it down in the description of this video. It's one of the few articles that I have found that's actually talking about the seriousness of the depletion within the lumber industry. and how it's starting to impact the inventory levels. I'm experiencing it personally. Like, it's funny to see how different it is this time around, considering what was causing the lumber depletion last time. Right back in 2019, when I was reporting on mill curtailments and shutdowns back then, it was for an entirely different reason. Right, it was like, I mean, it had to do with, it started off with a bug infestation and the salvage mode that was happening, and it was just a completely different thing that was going on. Right. But being able to see this now, where you find like the inventory level within the market itself is so is so dramatically different. Like, let me just kind of give you an example of what I mean here. So mills right now are producing pretty much what is selling, right? Which is going to be 2x4 and 2x6 studs and plate stock. Now, if you can imagine, the studs is like, the up and down boards of a building, and the plate stock is all the ones that are uh, that are horizontal. So you got plate stock and studs. That's essentially the two framing components that are the most common within a new home construction. You got 2x4, 2x6. That is what the mills run the most of. So that's what's selling. That's what they produce. That's what's going to be most prevalent within the market. Then you start finding that other things like longer lengths and wider boards are not as much produced in this type of environment because there's not as much demand for them. So now, something I found very interesting is that I got a price sheet the other day, and 2x12, 8 footers, and 10 footers were priced very low, like almost, I think they were under the futures price. They were like at 500 per thousand or something. And I thought, wow, that's it. But, how many eights and tens do, I mean, we run through maybe, a unit every, couple few months, right? I mean, it's just like, it's not a very common board purchased. Maybe it's used for header stock, maybe, some other things, but it's not a very common board, not like selling 2x4s or 2x6s would be. So these 2x12 eights and 10 footers were on the market there for like 500 per thousand. And then you go up to like the 16 footers, and they were like at 960 per thousand. It was like almost twice the price going up to a 16 footer as it was for the eights and tens. And this is because of the massive inventory, like, misallocation of where lengths should be. So they produced way too many eights and tens and not enough 16 footers at the time. 16 footers are depleted. There's hardly any on the market, but there's an abundance of these other two lengths. And now you have this huge price discrepancy between the two lengths, even though typically these would be within, 50 per thousand on if one was selling for 500, you might find one selling for 550, right? That would be kind of normal in the market, not double the price. And now this is, like, to me, obvious signs that there is huge holes and gaps within the inventory of lumber. And it's like, to me, that is an obvious sign of it. I can't show you anywhere on the internet that exists. Right? That's not something that you can go to a website and find. I mean, I think there is, like, you could probably use like Random Lengths or Madison's Lumber Reporter, but both of those are paid services to figure out where it is that the mills are charging, what their inventory levels are, I believe, and stuff like that. So there is places that you can go to pay for the information, but as far as just accessing it and having it, unless you are in the industry experiencing it, or you are paying for that information through one of those reports, I don't know where it is you can find it. Like, I don't know, like, the only other people who could report on it are people who are, like, other people who are in the industry, maybe mill operators or something like that. Keep your home and all the taxes and overhead. I don't need my net worth tied up like that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Let's see. How much? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I put quite a bit, I guess, in payments into the house, but then considering that rent is almost, in fact, it's more. I've heard more rent for a house than what my payments are on it. So, I mean, I guess there is a lot tied up into it. Taxes out here are pretty cheap, really. They did go up. My taxes did go up this year. I think it was like $150 a year, something like that. So, I mean, bit disappointing, but not like heartbreaking or anything like that. All right. Shipping container is pretty cool, but y'all still got to fit lumber and insulation and moisture control. And see, that's where I think like the insulated concrete form would do pretty well with that because if you, it's like basically building like a styrofoam cup, right? You know, like you're, but with concrete, poured in between it. So I think that environment, if you were to able to seal that off better from any kind of like, you had a decent roof over the top of it so it didn't actually get into the cavity of the building itself or the bunker. We're talking about underground bunkers with this. If you could do something of that nature, then I think like, dealing with moisture controls and dehumidifiers and stuff like that would probably, even if you had ability to exit the smoke out without being too noticeable, if you were trying to be inconspicuous, it might be a little difficult, but a wood stove does a great job at zapping the moisture out of the air. All right. But that would be difficult to have. I think that would be also somewhat dangerous to have in a very sealed, contained area. All right. Let's see here. I will say that a lot of the other farmers that do large cattle operations are also getting out. Have you seen 3D concrete printed houses? Yeah, we've talked about that. One of the things that, I mean, I like the idea of it because it's just like so simple that you can just like, set this machine up and it just kind of spits these walls out as it runs around the facility and putting out this strip of concrete that basically stacks the walls up. The only thing that I've looked at that and I say, okay, well, if I was to have that in my area, how often could I use it? Because like, it was raining earlier today and it's probably going to end up raining some more for the rest of the 9 months that we experience here during this year. So until like you get back into the summertime when you might have some opportunity to have better weather, I don't know how well those things would operate in like the Pacific Northwest when you have a downpour pretty much every single day. That would ruin the chances of you having the ability to do a concrete pour. Right now, maybe those things can do it in the rain. I don't know, like I maybe they fix that problem, but until then I see that there's really the way that they build houses up here is the most efficient to deliver the material to the job site and actually get the house built. Really, if you think about it, stick-built homes, people ask, how come they do it out of that and not concrete? You're like, how come they don't use more concrete for building homes? And I'm thinking it's because of how well and how quickly you can and how remotely you can distribute the material. Like really, if you, I mean, if you were of mind to do it, you could probably take, like I got a little S10, you put a lumber rack on it, and you could probably piece together an entire house, delivering it one piece at a time using a pickup truck. And you could do that all the way the hell way up in the mountains or something like that. Delivering loads of concrete all the way up into the mountains would be a little difficult. So when you think about how easy it is and how efficient it is to deliver the material to just about anywhere in the United States, it makes a lot of sense. That's why we end up using lumber. We have the facilities, we have the infrastructure, we have the skilled labor that already does it that way. And how easy it is to get to those remote areas, I think, is probably one of the key factors that it doesn't really move into any other type of material. Da-da. Okay, if you show up at a farmer's market with loaves of fresh made baguettes, I will take out my wallet and buy them. Yeah. Just got my property tax statement in Southern Oregon. Actually, ridiculous. In Mexico, they use concrete all the time. Yeah, I mean, well, lots of places in the world they do it. This is the thing. Like when you have an industry that's established, right? It's very difficult to then just say, "Hey, switch over to another industry." Like even now, when I think about like how many people I would know that could just immediately switch over to building out of concrete, right? Now I know a lot of concrete guys and I know a lot of framers. And I know those framers could pretty much switch over to building forms with not a lot of like need to learn. Like, I mean, they could, like, it would, they could probably figure it out inside of just a couple of days and know how to switch over to building concrete forms as opposed to, framing up walls. And it would be something of that ease. Now, the problem with it is that you would also have to be able to deliver that sheer amount of concrete to make up for all the lumber build that's happening. Right. So if all these houses that were being built out of lumber all of a sudden switch over to concrete, now you have a huge demand for concrete and you need the concrete facilities. And now concrete facilities are also very impactful to the environment. Now you have issues that go on with that again, you would have to ramp up in order to facilitate that trade into a new type of building material. All right. You see how this works? Like, if I was to ever see like a transition into a new type, I don't see it being like something like concrete that is already capable of doing it. If it was capable of doing it better, then it would be doing it, right? So concrete is available. You would have to force it into being used if it's not already being used. I see, like, the efficiency of using another building material always finds where the market is not like by choice. It's just the way the economy goes. It goes to the most efficient area. And concrete has its opportunity, but it doesn't do it. Now, if there was going to be a transition into anything, I think it's going to be something more like the cross-laminated timber industry, which I've talked about many times on this channel. And now it is finding very difficult path to get there. Like, it is not necessarily becoming like the next world awesome way of putting buildings together or anything like that. It is unique. It is getting noticed. It is happening more, but it's not like it's not meeting the qualifications of saying, hey, the new revolutionary way of building. It's moving in that kind of direction, but it's far from it, right? And so this is really where I think, okay, how much possible change could there be to the way that we do construction? Not a lot, right? There's not a lot. This is it. This is the way we do it. And now these other opportunities are existing. And if they are good, they will take over. If that's the case, let it happen. Right? Let's see it go. But until then, I'm going to stick with what it is that is actually working, what is being efficient out there. And that is the way that we distribute lumber through the system, and how it is that we stick built homes together, and how it is that we can deliver that material to just about anywhere in the globe or anywhere in the country. I'm sure we could do it anywhere in the globe too. But all right. I bought my house. Best decision. Yeah, me too, JK. I was not expecting it to be as good as it was. Like, I thought for sure that it was going to be way different, considering that, the idea that the Federal Reserve was going to raise rates was going to bring the housing market down. Like, I fell into that just as much as ever, even though it was almost against my theories that the Federal Reserve and their actions with monetary policy through interest rate adjustments really does not impact the economy. It was still very difficult to not take in the idea that once they raised rates, that it was going to put a downturn on the housing market and that you were going to see prices come down. That seemed very logical, right? That's what, like, I mean, I think everybody thought that, right? I don't think anybody out there really thought that once the Federal Reserve raised rates that you would see house prices go to their all-time highs. Like, I don't think that was necessarily part of like people's expectations or plans or ideas. Very much. And see, this is why I think like the credible threat theory just plays out even more every day, and to understand it, because like even now people are having a very difficult time understanding how it is that the Federal Reserve could cut interest rates and then see mortgage rates go up. It's like almost like the same thing. It's not about their movement anymore. It's not about their actions. And I have to remember this myself, because I want to fall into it just like everybody else does. But knowing that the monetary policy is not about the movement of interest rates, but the communication about it and how people perceive that communication. It's like the biggest psyops trick ever, right? But starting to, when you start to see it and recognize it more, when you see it happening within your own strategies and thoughts, it was just like, man, I thought it was going to go this way, but it went the other way. Why? It's because the credible threat theory is really truly playing out, right? And it's not about the interest rate adjustments, but the communication about it and how I receive that information, how the market's receiving that information, and how I see the market's receiving that information. Right? So crazy to think, but that's really how this goes down now. Okay. Um, Guys, I think I'm going to call it quits. We're going to keep this one short because people hate 2 hour long live streams. But I really enjoyed having this conversation with you guys. We got 230 people watching with 72 likes. It's important to follow this lumber industry. Try and follow it as best you can. I know that it's not the most exciting topic in the world, and lumber is like, again, sitting around doing nothing, so there's nothing really to talk about except for seeing that it's taken place. Right? The inventory levels are dropping. The demand for it is almost being promised by future administrations. When you see the supply-demand imbalance taking place, you know that prices are going to move. And how it is that you need to use this information, whether you're a contractor, real estate agent, somebody who's, oh, I see what you're doing there. You throw a $10 super chat at me and keep me going. Okay, hold on. Give me... But how you use this information is entirely up to you. Like, I am not trying to get people to go out there and invest in a particular direction or throw their money at anything. That is entirely up to you. You need to go do your own research on that. Please do so. Don't expect, like, for me to give you all the answers and stuff like that. But this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm saying. This is being truthful information. This is boots on the ground kind of stuff. And considering that I study into macroeconomics as deeply as I do, follow this idea. Right? It's not, and hey, I might be full of it, right? Who knows? But just follow this idea and see if it plays out, because it seems to be set up so perfectly for me, right? That if there is any kind of dramatic move into the actual construction, however it takes place, I mean, it doesn't matter how it is done, right? It's just the simple act of a home being built on a wide scale. If that was to take place, there is going to be a demand for lumber that simply is not there. Let's see here. Zach, thank you for the $10. U.S. policy and global economic asked UE. What is solution for housing problem? For example, JFK Jr. share market, and what is expected lowest mortgage interest rates after election will be? Okay, hold on one second. We got a couple of questions here, I think, don't we? U.S. policy and global economic asked UE. What is solution for the housing problem? Okay, I think that's one question. Example, JFK Jr. share market, and what is expected lowest mortgage interest rates after election will be? So I think that's the second question. Okay, so the solution for a housing problem, you're not going to like the solution, and okay. You guys are going to keep me out here. Okay, you're not going to like the solution, because the solution to the housing market problem actually goes back to the way that our economy is now structured, because we are no longer the producer-saver nation. When we were a producer-saver nation, it was the ability to acquire the house was much easier than it is today. Now, what we have moved into is a debtor-consumer nation, which means that we have a massive amounts of new money that pours into the system. When that new money pours into the system, it separates the rich from the poor, and there's no better way or better evidence of that but in the property owners and the capitalists who are out there. So when you see property prices and rents and leases that are at their all-time highs like they are, or at an elevated high like we are experiencing, there's no better sign of the abundance of money that is now in the system. This is the problem. This is why that it's going to be very difficult for people to get themselves on the other side of the wedge with their 9-to-5 job, because even a 9-to-5 job, a good job, sucks. So there is no fixing this housing problem unless we go back into what was that of a producer-saver nation, which means that you have to work extra hard for no luxurious increase in standard of living or anything like that, but actually a depletion in your standard of living so that you can pay off debts. You do it for the rest of your life. You suffer your kids through that entire life, your future generations into that, because it's probably going to take that many to get through all this, considering how many generations it has been moving the opposite direction, getting away from being that producer-saver nation. Once you have done that for, many generations, I don't know how long it would take, but after you get through this, then at that point, you will actually be in a condition in which that your standard of living will compete against the rest of the world's standard of living, and you can actually become a producer-saver nation again. When you are a producer-saver nation, you will have the ability to then have a middle class that is strong, and you'll find that the opportunity to have a house and a car and the wife and the kids and all the other opportunity will be there because of the massive amounts of products that you can then distribute out there to the rest of the world. See the problem here that we face? It's the Cantillon effect. You can't stop it. You can only recognize it for what it is and then try to figure out how it is that you can position yourself on that other side. How it is that you become the capitalist or the property owner, whether you have to team up, whether you have to house hack, whether you have to start from an early age and deploying money into a stock market account or whatever it is. You have to figure out the way to become the property owner or the capitalist, because there is no way, no way, no way an administration is going to come in and be able to fix this. Right? They just can't. They can't. So once you understand that there is no fixing this, the housing problem is not something that is going to be easily fixed. Right? You can't do it that way. It's because of the way that the system grows, how it expands, how the money flows, what it is supposed to do once you have an expanded currency. Right? We are in a situation in which that is very unique to the globe, in which that it has never occurred before, where we have this full-on fiat currency being the world reserve currency, where the world is buying up our debt and sending us their stuff while we produce very little for them other than the ability to protect their shipping channels. And after this is over, we are going to find it very difficult to live in and operate in a system where we have very little manufacturing for ourselves. Like, look at the idea of just trying to bring manufacturing back to the United States right now. It is very difficult. You're finding where, like, the CHIPS Act and all that other stuff is not being deployed in the way that it was promised. What, years ago now? I mean, it's just like, it's like almost dead in the water. And then what was the other one? And what is expected the lowest mortgage interest rate after the election? Oh, I couldn't tell you. Like, as far as where interest rates are going to go and stuff like that, I mean, as far as the level of them, I couldn't tell you. I mean, the election, I don't know. I mean, unless there is some sort of stimulus package launched to provide mortgages to people, anytime you ever do something like, okay, let me see if I can bring this back here a little bit. If you have government action that's taking place to increase the ability for people to acquire a mortgage, that is increasing demand. That doesn't increase supply. It's a supply-demand imbalance that is happening that's causing prices to go up. If you screw with the demand side and you try to increase the demand, you are screwing up this demand-supply imbalance and you're making it worse. So they're like, house prices are expensive. Why? Because there's not that many of them. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. Let's increase demand. Right? I mean, that's really essentially what ends up going on there. And therefore, it doesn't really end up working. Now, here we are in a situation in which they say, okay, well, let's increase supply. Screw the demand side. Let them figure that part out. Let's do the supply side. Let's figure that part out. So you start throwing money at supply saying, hey, build these homes. And now the homes say, yeah, we need this particular commodity to build this home because there's really nothing else out there. And that particular commodity is very limited in supply and limited in production. And guess what? If you throw a huge amount of demand at that particular commodity, we have already seen it move up to almost 3 times the price of what it is right now. So we know that it has the capability of achieving very, very significant highs if there is an unlimited amount of demand. Well, if you already have a limited amount of supply and government demanding it, what do you end up with? Supply-demand imbalances. There is no fixing this problem. Right? It's because of, it's better to understand it that this is like hundreds of years in the process to get here. understanding that we went through that manufacturing phase, understanding that the reason why we ended up moving from a gold standard is because we had acquired all the gold and we were about ready to redistribute that back out there to the rest of the world. As our standard of living had elevated, foreign production was moving in, and when foreign production moves in, money moves out. So we severed that from happening, said we're going on a 100% fiat currency, we're going to keep the gold, and everybody can use the dollar, and we'll just back everything with US debt. Right? This is the situation that we are now in. So ever increasing amounts of new money started pouring in. Well, if you have new money that pours in, you're going to have a continuation of the separation. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just the way it works. Even if you were to take the new money and hand it directly over to the poor and say, here, you can have this, just go deal with it, they would be like, okay, great. A handful of them would probably be smart. Most of them will just blow it. It'll go right to the rich anyway. And no matter what you do, new money coming into the system creates the separation. It's the move into luxuries. If all the new money came in and it moved into production and savings, then it would be a different story. But that's not what happens. Right? New money comes in and it goes to luxuries, and then the system falls apart. All right. Cool. Well, thank you for the $10. You got me to stick around for another 15 minutes. I really appreciate it. Amen. Time to tell them to shove it and take away your tax dollars for the economy. Produce your own food and energy. Speak with your money, buy local, and trade when you can. Well, I think if you understood and really understood how the Cantillon effect really ends up like damaging the economy, damaging production, eventually destroying your way of life, right? When you understand how this works, how this like economic force takes place through the economy, through the system, then you don't have to blame. Because like most people are like, I want to blame politicians for not maintaining this in a particular frame that makes it look just like this. Right. I think that's like almost, I think that comes down to all politics, right? It's just like, I want to blame somebody because they cannot maintain it to look like this picture that I have right here. This is the way it should be. Okay? And then it was just like, okay, yeah, that's the way it should be. We can all wish and hope and dream and pray that that's the way it could be, but that's not the way it is, right? The way it is that you are a producer saver. If all of us were producer savers, it would be a much different story than being debtor consumers. But instead, we are debtor consumers, and if all of us are debtor consumers, we can't expect it to look like this picture over here that says, hey, this American dream thing, right? It doesn't, like, this is what it looks like now because we are not in the same people anymore. It has this totally different picture. And people were like, man, that's like not the way it should be. And I was like, well, yeah, you're right. It's not, but that's the way it is. All right. Thanks, Simon, and everyone. Alrighty, thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun. I love Mondays to Fridays. Imagine to become alive. Why market is open, baby. Bank time. Right on. All right. If you can't make money now in today's modern world, my God, you need help. Well, I don't think it's necessarily the making money. It's understanding how that money is made and what it is that you need to do with it. Because it doesn't really matter how much money you make. Like, I know a lot of people might laugh at that, but it doesn't. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It's a matter of how much money you can save. Because there's people out there who make $50,000 a year, don't save any money. There's people out there who make $150,000 a year and still don't save any money. So whether it's $150,000 a year or $50,000 a year, if you can't save any money, then it doesn't matter how much money you make. Right? It's all about how much money you can save. And by essentially bringing your cost of living down as much as you possibly can, taking on very little expenses. New cars, very expensive. All the subscriptions that are out there for your entertainment, very expensive. Eating out, very, very expensive. All these things are very expensive. You eliminate those things out of your life, pretty soon you realize, oh, maybe I can save a little bit of money. Once you start saving money, hey, now you're a producer saver, right? Now you're in a producer saver mindset. If more people start acting this way, they can start saving and investing into things within business operations, stock portfolios, precious metals, whatever. They're producing savings saving for the future, using that future savings to become more of a producer saver. And if you're in this sort of mentality and everybody else is in this mentality, then pretty soon the economy doesn't look the same way. Right? It just doesn't look the same way. People are like, you bought a new car? Wow, and you must be really producing saving in order to buy a new car, right? Because you're not just going into debt and living paycheck to paycheck, right? Because you're a producer saver like all the rest of us are. That's how this economy works. Works well, works strong, it's resilient, right? But no, if we're all sitting out there buying new cars and loaded up on credit card debt, we're very fragile, very subject to government rule, very, worried about the future because our debt payments are everything to us and how it is that we can hold on to our lives because we have expanded ourselves so far out there and leveraged ourselves to the point that we don't have any money at the end of the month. That's how most people end up operating. All right. I'm babbling now. Uneducated economist. You guys let me know.